Action movies have come to prove to us that there's always a way to keep films exciting. We are always looking for what is the next action movie that's going to keep us on our feet or keep us on the edge of our seat. And ultimately, we are bombarded with several movies. Sometimes there are action movies that don't quite land, and you kind of are stuck in this sort of like loop of, is it good, is it not good? It's difficult to say sometimes, but when it comes to the Mission Impossible franchise, that has always been its main goal: how to entertain our audiences to the absolute extent that they can feel excitement. And it's no different when we are talking about the newest installment of the Mission Impossible films, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So before I get any deeper into this, I do have to say that I will be covering spoilers. Now, by the time that you guys see this video, it would have been already a week that this movie has been in theaters, so I think that a week is a good time to come out with a video and say like, hey, here are the spoilers, here's what you need to watch out for, the type of stuff that, people don't want to learn about the movie before seeing them. So if you are the type of person who is not spoiler prone, meaning someone who does not care for spoilers, that I can talk about the movie freely, please stick with it, because we have a lot to cover in this video. And once you guys, if you are interested in seeing this movie, go see it in theaters and then come back. I also love it when I get comments in my videos talking about people who got to see it in theaters. So it's really cool to see those comments down there. So other than that, if you're into it, let's continue. So as we all know, when it comes to Mission Impossible films and Mission Impossible in general, action is always at the forefront of what they do, But as of recently, and ultimately, I'm about to cover at least one of my two, I would say, sort of gripes with this movie. One more on the side of the audience, and one more on the side of the viewer. So the first thing is the overall audience. What do I think is the one thing that the overall audience is not going to ultimately like about this movie? And that is the runtime. This movie is 2 hours and 49 minutes, I believe, and that's including credits, obviously. That's a really long time for most viewers. Now, for me, that's not a problem. Ultimately, runtime is not the problem with me. I really don't care how long a movie is, as long as it's willing to tell the story the right way. Now, for me, the runtime of this movie did not matter. I think that the runtime was fine. There are times where you do feel like a certain drag on the story, but very little does that ever even come close to being a problem. I'm talking about, like, it was minimal. Like, it's almost disregardable at most. So for me personally, didn't drag too much, but I do see that being a problem for other people. So if you're not the type of person who likes a really long runtime, just be aware that this movie is a longer movie. I didn't mind it. It didn't affect me in the slightest, but maybe if you're the one watching and you don't like it, you're probably not going to like it. So that's the first thing, and that's the more audience gripe thing. As for someone who is the viewer of this movie, as someone who views this movie, and I would call this the only major gripe that I have with this movie, that I don't feel like the other Mission Impossible movies kind of have a problem with, and that is, ultimately, there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversations, talking points, moments in the movie that just really, there's a lot of talking involved. And for me, when it comes to Mission Impossible, like I've already said before, action is paramount. Not to play a pun because the movie is made by Paramount, but ultimately, that sort of thing is not what I look for in a Mission Impossible movie. I look for action. action is at the forefront. If you are going to make a movie and you're going to have all this action, you don't need that much dialogue. You really don't need that much dialogue in order to make this a reality. So ultimately, that's the only major gripe I have with this movie. But other than that, this movie has some really great things going for it. So what exactly do I think is like the big, great, overall expanding factors in this movie? The main things that really caught my attention. So the first thing that I really would like to say that I heard some people complain, but I don't think it was a problem. As a matter of fact, it kind of enriched the story a little bit, was the fact that there were a lot of callbacks to previous films. A lot of little callbacks that worked for the film in its favor, actually. One of the major callbacks that I really enjoyed seeing was them calling back to Mission Impossible 3. When they talk about the rabbit's foot. What is the rabbit's foot? What is this? What is that? There's a callback to that film in this movie that actually works in its benefit, because ultimately it kind of makes the third film a direct connection into this film. And I love that they are able to come back to this MacGuffin. For those of you who don't know, MacGuffins are, I'll put the definition right underneath here so you can see. That's what a MacGuffin is. Generally speaking, it's just an item that keeps the plot moving. But what I think is that MacGuffin, we never knew what that MacGuffin was. We never knew what the rabbit's foot was in its entirety, even though at the very end of the movie, they never reveal to the audience or to Ethan. Ethan doesn't even know what the rabbit's foot is. It ends the movie without you knowing what it is. You just know that you saved the world, you just don't know what it is. Now, there's a disguise with that MacGuffin saying that it was, this biohazardous material, and in fact, it was where they kept the core code for the entity, which we talk about here. So that direct callback, very cool. Very cool. I actually liked that they called back to this because it enriched the story. It actually helped us to understand what they were trying to save the world from, in the third film. So that's a really cool idea to call back, an item, a MacGuffin from that movie, bring it into this film, and allow itself to envelop into the story. Some people said that this was a complete retcon of what it was, but ultimately the audience nor the people who wrote the movie wrote any explanation to this thing other than it was a biohazardous weapon. That's it. So this is a really cool way to explain it. Now there are other callbacks that I really loved. Seeing the guy from the first film who, Ethan infiltrates, and then we see him in this film again as a character. Really cool callback, and then ultimately him thanking Ethan for having, kind of ruined his job, which ultimately, as an extent, helped him marry the woman of his dreams that he absolutely loves. So that was a great little callback. And seeing him hand the knife to Ethan, really cool callback to the first film. I think it's a really cool idea to, bring these little factors back into this film. Really cool idea. And the beginning of the movie as well. How could I forget? The beginning of the movie, you see a bunch of flashbacks from the other films. So that's a really cool little idea to actually get this movie, with all these flashbacks. Cool idea. Some people did not like it. I saw it on the internet. A lot of people were like, oh, why are they calling back to this? I think it worked. I think it was not a bad idea to actually add these scenes in there, which allow people to refresh their memory, which is really cool. So all in all, the little callbacks actually worked for me. Now this movie has its I'm not going to say fair share of deaths. This movie has 2 deaths that I would call quote unquote major in this movie. And the deaths in question are one of MI's, the Impossible Mission Force's team, and one is the titular character, the entity rider, as we should all call him, Gabriel, in this movie. Both, I'm not going to say they were shocking. I would say that Luther's death was the most shocking thing of this movie, because I did not expect Luther to die in this movie. But there is something that kind of like irked me, was that we see him bedridden in the movie. Now, I don't know if that is his cover, like he's just faking being like a patient. I don't think that's the case, though, because they never go back to it. They never say like, oh, Luther was, dying and he needed, assistance and that sort of thing. And there was no coverage of that in the movie, which I think is a bit of a bummer. I wish they actually had talked about it. But I think, I'm gonna miss Luther. I always felt like Luther was the heart of the team, and to think that he dies in this movie trying to help his entire team, which is inside this tunnel system. I think it was a purposeful death. It wasn't a death that I would say like, oh, okay, why did they kill off the character? It wasn't that. I think it worked for the type of character that he is, and ultimately gave him a really nice ending. So I really think that was a positive in that regard. Now the other death, which is Gabriel's death, which I think is probably, there's no other word to describe it except it's a very comical death. I think it's the first time where you watch, a Mission Impossible movie and the death scene of a character is fairly comical. I think the last time we had that was in the third film. Again, calling back to the third film. Philip Seymour Hoffman's death in that movie, he's run over by a car. And that's ultimately the death scene of that movie, which is kind of hilarious. So this movie kind of has that, but it's Gabriel and he like, the line he says is hilarious. I'm the only one with a parachute. And then like he essentially jumps off and gets literally nut-sacked by the tail of the plane, and then ultimately his head hits the fin of the plane and he dies, which honestly was very comical, seeing that happen, which you don't expect. Like, the most tense moment of the movie is actually funny, which is like, wow, Oh, and by the way, forgot to mention, this movie does not have that much comedy. There are tiny little comedic moments, but I really wish there were more. There were more comedic moments in this movie to allow people to feel a little bit lighter. Because ultimately I think that would have helped the movie along the way. But this movie is pretty serious. And this also brings me to my next point. And that is that for some people, this movie is going to be pretty dark. It's going to be kind of, it's going to be a dark film for some people. It's just like, man, like, it could be kind of a dark drag kind of film. I didn't think it was that big a deal, the overall tone of the movie, because ultimately the movie has, its tense moments. And this kind of helps in a way with the overall tone of the movie. I wish it had a few lighter touches, a few more lighter touches, but it is a dark subject matter. The entire world is at stake, and this AI has taken over, and ultimately this is a type of film that there's really little lightning to happen. It kind of feels like would you see a very light kind of, bubbly story arc in a movie like Terminator Salvation? You wouldn't find that there, because you're already in the world where, people are just kind of like having to deal with these machines, and it's this dark world and that sort of thing. Like, you don't see any levity in that story, because it's kind of in that sort of ballpark, like, it's a dark film, it's a dark story. I'm not comparing it to Terminator Salvation. I want to make that clear. Terminator Salvation is not this movie. This movie is way better. I'm just saying that. I think this movie is way better than Salvation. But it can kind of feel in that same dark area sometimes. But then again, the subject matter is very dark. And it kind of helps out the story in its own way. And on top of that, we have to acknowledge the actors in this movie. The actors in this movie are phenomenal. Phenomenal. Every single person is phenomenal in this movie. We get, great moments with Simon Pegg, Benji. Fantastic. Seeing Simon Pegg be Benji, kind of, tense at moments. Seeing him in the end kind of like struggling to help out, the team because he's like, injured. Then ultimately seeing this other part of the team kind of like try to do what he would normally do, Haley Atwell, fantastic in this movie. She's always bringing, intensity to that role. Even though she's kind of new to the franchise. She is essentially new. Like, she was in the last movie, and she's in this one, so she's new to the franchise. So, really cool seeing her in this film, really bringing, like, true dramatic acting to this character, even though she's in, like, a handful of scenes. I would say, like, it's pretty balanced in this movie. Like, every actor is kind of balanced in a way. So everybody kind of like has their moment to shine. Pom Klementieff. Holy cow. She has a lot more to do in this movie, a lot more lines to say in this movie. Dead Reckoning, she was kind of in the background and worked more like a henchman, or henchwoman, I should say, for Gabriel. In this case, she is her own character. Paris is that own character. And I really like that she just interjects from time to time in the movie in French. She like says maybe one line the entire film in English. One line. So really cool to see her in this film kicking ass. I want to see more of her. She's awesome. She's absolutely freaking awesome. And I cannot wait to see her if she decides to continue in Mission Impossible, which is something that we'll discuss a little bit later. Tom Cruise. What can I say? Legend. I don't think I have any other words other than legend to speak of what he's been able to accomplish in this film. Whether it's the physical acting part, the regular acting part, as in, being an actor and not, doing anything physical. I feel like the more movies he does, and he does physical things, like being on the plane, super low to the ground, cutting through this canyon. Honestly, I don't think I have even words in my own vocabulary that can describe how freaking insane that is. It's just that insane to see him do these stunts and be, possibly, and he'll probably go down in history as probably not only of one of the greatest actors of all time, but one of the greatest stunt actors of all time as well, which is amazing and absolutely mind-blowing. I do have to talk about Angela Bassett in this movie. Even though her moments are limited in this film, I think she really stands out. She gives a performance of, what a president has to do, deal with difficult situations, and she deals with those difficult situations on screen. Even though she's a tiny part of the puzzle, it's Angela Bassett. Need I say more? She's phenomenal. Even though it's a small part, fantastic. Nick Offerman shows up in this movie. Great, acting from him. Again, tiny role, great acting. Katie O'Brien, fantastic. Seeing her in this movie. Again, small role, but I feel like she could possibly have a bigger role in, the franchise's future. I have a feeling that's going to be the case because of the way she kind of looks at him in this movie. And ultimately we get Tramell Tillman, who we all know as Milchek from Severance, Milkshake, as we all know him. Fantastic. Somebody said this online before I watched the movie, and I'm gonna have to repeat it because it's very accurate. He oozes charisma every time he's on screen. That's all. He just oozes charisma every time he's on screen, and you're just like, that's the way to do it. That he's the man. Like, I absolutely love this guy. Fantastic acting from him, even though it's a smaller role in the movies. Incredible. And I feel like that's the overall sensation with all these actors, is just that, power pack of amazing people brought together to make this film, which all of them work beautifully. Now, something that some action movies are rarely capable of, impacting me at least, is the fact that a movie has to give you and make you feel tension at every moment. And I feel like this movie did just that. I felt at moments in this movie, like I was like, how is he gonna do it? Like, how is this possible? Like, how is he gonna get out of this? Like, I was fidgeting sometimes, and my heart, I swear to God, I swear to everybody who is watching, my heart was pounding for most of this film. If you are gonna go see an action movie and your heart is pounding the way my heart was pounding, I feel like you would have a positive view of the movie as much as I did, which, it has incredible sequences. Just the submarine sequence alone is probably one of the greatest moments in Mission Impossible. That one sequence of him going into the submarine underwater and having to kind of navigate this crazy thing and see the dead bodies of these soldiers, which lo and behold, we find out that they were dead for a very long time. And I didn't know that even after watching Dead Reckoning. They didn't really cover the dates of when this ship kind of showed up. If they did, it wasn't clear, but in this movie, they make it very clear. They say it 3 times, oh yeah, this was back in 2012. So this has been going on since 2015, and all this stuff has been happening. It's really interesting to see that they're, kind of getting into the story and explaining to people hey, it was a while back. But nonetheless, let's put that aside here. Again, tension is the name of the game here. Action, getting my blood pumping, seeing things that typically people don't go to the theater to see in physical form, like seeing an actor do something physically constraining, in that sense. Seeing him on that plane that we've seen the footage. Go back about 2 years ago when they were announcing, Dead Reckoning and showing people essentially moments of the movie, mainly the plane sequence. To think that was 2.5 years ago that we saw Tom Cruise on the top of the plane and him talking to people. It's oh, I'll see you at the movies. And then the planes just dive. To think that all of that was part of this movie is really cool. And I would highly recommend you go see it in theaters on a big screen, because it is blood pumping and there's so many things. If you know anything about aviation, seeing what they were able to accomplish with these 2 planes in this chase sequence is the logistical nightmare that this would probably go through when it comes to people who take care of the safety of actors. Oh my goodness. Like, I don't even know how many things to even comprehend here. Like, my brain is just mush at this moment, in absolute awe of what they were able to accomplish here. So I think you guys are probably wanting to know the big elephant in the room. The big question. The question that every single person has been asking online. And that one elephant is right in the title, right? Like Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, meaning it's the final movie of the series, right? That's what everybody would think. Everybody would possibly be in their mind thinking, this is probably the last Mission Impossible, right? Well, here's the thing. If they just decide that, okay, this is the last Mission Impossible movie, Tom Cruise isn't doing anymore, okay. If they decide to do that, this is a fairly good outing of the series. That's if they decide to make this the last movie. Do I think that this is the last movie? The last Mission Impossible movie? No, I don't think this is the last Mission Impossible movie. I doubt that Tom Cruise would be like, I'm tired, I'm not gonna do this. I doubt that would be the case. Doubt it. Because I still feel like he has another 3 Mission Impossible movies to do before he said, like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to leave this to the new generation, and hopefully they make do with all of this. I get it. I feel like that's the goal here. The goal is to get people excited even more so for the series. Go back, rewatch, add new things, possibly to future films. So I do feel like that is what they're going for here. They want to have a continuation, and ultimately that's how this movie ends. This movie ends feeling as though you are meeting your new team. You're meeting the new team of IMF. And it doesn't end as though it's like, okay, he's putting up his gloves, he's just, laying back, relaxing, not doing anything, like a Dark Knight Rises, kind of like Bruce Wayne chilling, with his wife. No. This feels like a continuation. There's a continuation here that is going to happen, and I would be very happy and glad to go see it in theaters, whenever that case may be. I would be very happy to see it, and hopefully, there are minor changes to the story where we can get a little bit more action, a little bit less dialogue, not a lot less, but a little bit less dialogue, and hopefully we get, another action-packed movie in the works. And all in all, I do think this film was phenomenal. I think it was a great film. It really does feel like a Mission Impossible film. It is a direct sequel to Dead Reckoning. I know that I made a joke on if you go back a week and you see that when I went to see the movie, I actually literally said, hey, this is the Final Reckoning, Part 4, Act 2, because ultimately this movie was going to be called Dead Reckoning Part 2, but then they renamed it to The Final Reckoning. So it's Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning, so that people know that those are 2 different films. Even though it is very funny to put in a DVD or watch the film and it says Dead Reckoning Part 1 in the edit, that's where we are with things. It's Dead Reckoning Part 1 and then Final Reckoning, where people are going to be like, okay, so where's Part 2 of Dead Reckoning? I know, really weird kind of name change there. It's not a Thunderbolts type name change. It's more of a change the whole name of the movie kind of situation. But nonetheless, I feel like this movie did really well. I hope that it does really well at the box office, because I want to see more Mission Impossible movies, and hopefully people get excited about this film, and hopefully for the prospective future that this the movie might bring. I really want to see what is new to come from Mission Impossible, and this just makes me even more excited to see where it goes. Now, I do want to make a quick little mention here of this film. There is a tiny, because obviously in Dead Reckoning we got an Uncharted moment with the whole train sequence, but in this movie I feel like there was a tiny little Uncharted feeling scene where Haley Atwell is actually communicating with, Bill's wife, and there's this really funny little interaction there between the two. One is trying to like explain to the other something. It felt to me like Uncharted 2, again, another Uncharted 2 reference, Nathan Drake with, Tenzin. Remember, like when, Nathan Drake shows up in that village in the Himalayas, I think it's the Himalayas, right? In Nepal, in the Nepal region, that's a really funny kind of interaction that we see there. Same thing from the game we see in this movie. Even though it's a tiny little interaction, it kind of felt like Uncharted in a way. But nonetheless, that's my little tiny mention because I just remembered that. But if you are not like me and you didn't like this movie, I want you to go down in the comments below and tell me why you didn't like Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Now, if you did like the movie, tell it to me in the comments. I want to hear from you what you think. And if you are the type of person who loved this film and has been watching me talk about this movie the entire time, throughout this entire film, and you've been seeing me hold the keys from the film, you're probably asking yourself, like, where did you buy this? I'm interested. Well, I made these with my 3D printer, and I added a little bit of, spray paint, and I, put in some dots of red and white in here, if you're curious about it. And just so you know, these two pieces are functional. They're literally functional, and there you go. They actually close, and you can actually have the actual key, just like in the film. So it's a really cool little prop that I have from the film that I 3D printed and custom made myself. So really cool little thing. And if you are interested in finding that out, just know that you can find the print files in Printables. There we go. I think that I covered everything, and by everything I mean talking to you people about this awesome film, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And if you have any questions about what I thought about the movie, or maybe put your opinions that you thought about this movie, or if you haven't watched the movie, tell me why you're not going to watch this movie. Tell it to me down below because I want to hear it from you. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live on this channel. And thank you so much for watching this video. And I'll see you in the next video.
Scrolling through YouTube, same old routine, then bam, movie savant, what a scene. Trivia bombshells dropping knowledge like rain. Forget the dishes, gotta watch it again. Movie buffs unite, savants to place. Subscribe and hit the bell, don't leave a trace. Next level knowledge keeps you in the loop. Savants got the scoop, ain't nothing to recoup.